I'm Sandi Seigel, president of Dey Company.
And I'm Ian Coxhead, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and this is another episode of Talking Trade.
Ian, I'm excited to talk today about the signing that happened recently, the new trade pact, the RCEP. So I'm hoping you can explain a little bit about it and what your thoughts are on the implications of this big trade pact.
Well, thanks, Sandy. Yeah, of course, RCEP is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is kind of a word salad, but that's the trade deal signed last week by 15 countries in East and Southeast Asia plus Oceania. So that's the 10 ASEAN countries: China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand. Together, these make up 30% of world GDP and 30% of world population. So this is actually, by those measures at least, the biggest trade deal ever signed, biggest free trade deal ever signed in the world. And you know, it's pretty interesting that the US is not a signatory to RCEP. There's a story behind that, of course. It's kind of historically interesting that RCEP bookends the Trump administration era in that at the beginning of the Trump administration, one of the first acts of this president was to withdraw the US from the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a very big trade deal that included the US but excluded China. And at the end of the Trump administration, we have instead RCEP, which includes China but excludes the United States.
Exactly. So I find myself a little concerned about both of those things. You know, and a little bit like we're left out of the party, if you will. It's a big trade pact, as you say, and you know, it's bigger than the EU. It's certainly bigger than, you know, the USMCA. And what do you think the implications of that are for us in the US and not being, you know, part of these two important trade pacts?
Yeah, so RCEP is big, but it's also pretty shallow as trade deals go. You know, these days we talk about next generation trade deals that go way behind tariffs into the countries that are signatories, talking about, you know, government procurement and subsidies to state firms and things like that, and environment and labor and other measures. RCEP has none of that. And so it's kind of like a traditional trade deal in that it's mostly focused on tariffs. But, you know, I think maybe the two most important things about it. First of all, it's the first real FTA, free trade agreement, that includes China, Japan, and Korea. That's really, really big. And the second is that if there's any kind of real substance to the RCEP, it is that it harmonizes rules of origin across all of the partners to the deal. Now, rules of origin, as you know, rules that say if you want to produce and export a good within the trade partnership, then a certain percentage of the content of that good has to come from within the partnership. So rules of origin matter a great deal. And in this case, harmonizing those rules of origin across all of those trade partners will hugely facilitate manufacturing trade within the region.
Correct, right. And that, you know, is not unique to trade agreements, but because it's so many countries, it really, you know, gives some nice economic strength, as you say, to encourage, you know, production from country to country and, you know, various parts and components as long as it stays within that pact. So again, being on as an outsider of that and China being such a powerhouse, you know, concerns on how, you know, that might make us less competitive, not being part of that trade agreement. So, you know.
Well, you know, you're right, Sandy, that RCEP, the partner countries are very diverse. It's all the way from Japan and Korea, very rich, and Singapore, all the way down to some pretty poor countries in Southeast Asia and, of course, Australia, New Zealand as well. So that's a pretty comprehensive group of countries when you think about what they all bring to the table collectively. But you know, something that I think is really important to US businesses is that RCEP excludes agriculture, and it excludes most of the services trade issues as well. It doesn't have anything to say on e-commerce, for example. And all of these things are major US exports to Asia. So maybe you're hearing a little bit from your clients about their reactions to that. It looks like US manufacturers might be hurt, but that the exporters of these other goods and services, agriculture and various services, might find that the door is no more open or no more closed than it was before.
I think it's too soon to know. Obviously, anytime there's a trade pact, and again, that, you know, we're not part of, there's concern where that leaves us. And I think we all pay close attention to what China's doing, since it's such a significant influence economically. So that's, I think, where we need to continue to keep our eyes, and that in parallel with our other China negotiations, I think is, you know, will be an important piece. So I think it's a little too soon to say, and certainly the next few years and the change in administration will be very telling.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, Sandy, I think you're right to say we should wait and see. You know, one of the disturbing things that about RCEP is not about RCEP itself, but the fact that this is a continuation of a whole series of trade deals being struck around the world that don't include the United States. The America First attitude over the last few years has seen us walk away from or be excluded from a whole bunch of trade deals. So you look at the EU, they're going ahead. They've already signed a deal with Canada, the CETA, with Japan, with Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand. They're moving ahead with Mercosur. So all of these deals are going on around the world. And up until now, at least, the United States has not been engaged with those. And that's going to cost us, I'm sure.
something I think I hope that we see a little change in momentum moving forward.
Yeah.
Ian, thank you as always for your insight on that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks, Sandy. Me too.